You were the guy that oversaw the last stimulus, Neil. House Speaker Pelosi told Kramer this morning that one of the big stumbling blocks, and that is oversight, has been agreed to. She said there will be an inspector general of this $500 billion that will go toward corporations. How important is that?
Oh, it is incredibly important, Sarah, and I think this is a really, really important development. As originally was proposed, there was going to be very limited oversight. That which was going to be there, it sounds like and looked like was going to be just based on existing already overtaxed inspectors general. And so having a dedicated resource or dedicated resources to make sure that we're keeping an eye on waste, fraud, and abuse and making sure these programs are implemented with maximum transparency is so important going forward if they're going to work.
So I imagine you're having a bit of deja vu, as many of us are, as we await to see any sort of deal and compromise. Give us your lessons from overseeing TARP last time and what you would do differently that the lawmakers need to consider as they try to hammer this out right now.
You know, I think one of the most important things is on this issue of strings attached or conditions, which I know there's a lot of debate. The bottom line is that when we bail out institutions, when we provide government assistance, we do so for a policy reason. There's policy goals behind this. Last time, the policy was to restore lending and to help homeowners. But what happened last time is you didn't have the conditions, the restrictions, incentives, carrots, sticks, however you want to call it, to actually bring about those policy goals. And so what happened is all this money, hundreds of billions of dollars, got pushed out, but the Treasury Department didn't want to put any of those conditions and sort of just trusted the institutions to carry out the government's policy goals. Well, that didn't work. And we know it didn't work, again, because of oversight, because of transparency, because my old agency was able to do an audit and show that the banks were not using the money to increase lending or to help homeowners. And so you have to have that connection. If we're going to put forward trillions of dollars of taxpayer money, and if that goal is, again, whatever it's described, if it's to help make sure that people keep their jobs, if it's to restart the economy, you got to have conditions, and then you have to have oversight to make sure those conditions are being fulfilled. I think that's one of the most important things, right up there with transparency and a strong law enforcement presence.
Do you see that happening right now, or does it look like the Treasury Secretary and the Treasury is just going to have discretion over where those funds go and how they get distributed?
You know, it's a very much an evolving process. I think it sort of started in a place that would be a little scary. The idea of rolling out money, giving wide discretion to the Treasury Secretary, making it so he wouldn't even have to disclose who the recipients are for a period of 6 months. And I say nothing against the current administration, but that's a recipe for corruption and disaster. And again, I'm not talking about the type of corruption where bags of cash are trading hands, although, again, without transparency, that's a real possibility. I'm talking about the politicalization of the process of who gets the money, right? I mean, what we don't want to have is a situation where the company that gets the loan or gets the grant or gets the guarantee is the one that has the best political connections or the fiercest lobbyists or, or frankly knows a member of Congress in a particular district who can advocate more forcefully than someone in another district, because all of that will happen for sure. But if you have enough transparency and you have oversight mechanisms that will bring those types of things to the surface, you get two things. One, you get the type of strict controls that are necessary so that everyone is playing on an even playing field here. Second, you have that deterrent, that Treasury official or that member of Congress or that company, if they know that if they try to game this process, that it's going to come to the surface, be exposed on CNBC and in congressional hearings, you really have a much, much better chance of making it fair. And that's going to make it more efficient and more effective. And that is what we had. For all the failings of the prior bailout, we had transparency brought forth by oversight. And we really were able to sort of beat back those efforts and minimize their impact.
Neil, I think you've said or written that bailouts are almost by definition a perversion of capitalism, given that normal market forces, apparently they say, are not going to prevail. We are now talking about a bailout of incredible proportions for the second time in 12 years. What does that say about capitalism?
Well, I think it's probably not the best to read too much into this one about capitalism, right? I mean, this is such an extraordinary event. I mean, the complete shutdown of the global economy because of a worldwide pandemic is, if anything warrants a bailout, I think it is this. But I think the questions that we have to ask ourselves going in as we administer this bailout, do we want to reward the companies that were maybe teetering on collapse going into this and artificially supporting them versus, choosing our limited resources to help the companies that were already in strong state? There's this big debate about buybacks. Do we really want to take government taxpayer dollars and funnel it through companies to the shareholders who've reaped rewards from big buybacks and dividends, or do we want to make sure that the money stays within the company, at least for the duration of the bailouts, if not for some time afterwards? We are tinkering with capitalism. That's what we do when we bail out, and then that's necessary. But we need to keep an eye on capitalism and not just do this in a way that supports everything in a panic. And we saw that in the last bailout, where sort of panic overruled, moral hazard for large institutions went out the window, and money was just shoveled out without really paying attention to the long-term consequences and the damages it does to capitalism. And I just think that's a really important thing for us to focus on here when we're talking about conditions, when we're talking on restrictions about distributing capital, that we keep an eye so we can get back to normal capitalism, creative destruction, which we interfere with when we bail out companies.